Putin's total lies about the situation at the front.
You said that during the recent retreat, the Ukrainian armed forces deliberately shot innocent civilians.
Non-existent captures of cities.
More than 50% of the city is under our control. I have no doubt that the guys will take this settlement as well.
And record Russian losses for all the years of the war with minimal advances.
Less than 1% of the country's territory. They spent 11 trillion rubles and several tens of thousands of Russian soldiers' lives on this.
Today we'll talk about the results of 2025 at the front. A brilliant operation by Ukrainian special services to destroy Russia's strategic aviation and the failure of the Russian offensive near Pokrovsk. And the encirclement of the occupiers there, as well as a striking slap in the face to the bunker dweller from President Zelensky, who recorded a video address from the supposedly captured Kupiansk. Find out what made 2025 memorable right now in the new episode of Arsenal. The main hotspot of the war in 2025 was Pokrovsk. The long-suffering city which had been repelling Russian attacks for months finally could not hold out this year. And now the fighting is already taking place inside the city itself. However, it is still a long way from the Russian side's claims that they have full control there.
A very important event was our capture of the city of Krasnoarmysk, because from there, new opportunities open up. This is the appropriate level of military leadership. A decision still needs to be made, specifically about which direction to move in. But this is a very good foothold for further offensive operations.
Kremlin propaganda doesn't stop repeating this nonsense for even a day, while at the same time, for some reason, regularly sending hundreds of fighters to reinforce those who are supposedly already basking in the glory of victory in Pokrovsk.
Putin orders specific information. Putin has constructed a worldview that the generals' reports must conform to. And those generals who report to Putin anything other than what he wants to hear stop being generals. They, so to speak, become retired generals, or let's say people who lose their freedom.
For the same reasons, the Russians also lost several hundred soldiers who attempted a breakthrough from Pokrovsk towards Dobropilya. And later, about 1,000 more who were sent to reinforce them. The advancing group of occupiers was simply cut apart by flanking strikes, encircled and destroyed, and the maneuver itself was a complete failure.
Such wide flanking maneuvers are definitely not for the Russian army. It's not their specialty, and this task is impossible for them. They simply cannot control such penetrations.
The solution was to change the command in this sector, which has already shown results in the last days of 2025. Sukrab Akhmetov, in his new position, decided, as they say, to act decisively and organized a mechanized assault on Ukrainian positions.
Previously, Akhmetov had already been removed from command, including for heavy losses without results during assaults. At Pavlivka and Vuhledar, he essentially just as thoughtlessly drove columns and groups of soldiers from the 155th. Now, having gained even more power, he formed a column from several marine units and, consisting of 30 vehicles, sent them to their deaths. The consequences are shown in the footage: 6 tanks, 9 BMPs, 5 APCs, 1 BRM and 10 ATVs.
Kupiansk is the second most important city in the past 6 months, which also remains on the front pages of military publications. And here the situation is much more clear-cut. At the end of November, Putin's generals also reported its capture and the encirclement of several thousand Ukrainian armed forces soldiers there.
In the area of operations of the Western Military Group, the city of Kupiansk is encircled.
None of the sources, including the ZID military correspondents, confirmed this information at the time. But the funniest thing is that just a week later from that very same encircled Kupiansk, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recorded his address.
I wish you good health. Today, the Kupiansk direction. Our soldiers here are achieving results for Ukraine. The Russians talked a lot about Kupiansk. We see it, I was there.
At the same time, the number of Russian statements about victorious advances is not decreasing. However, these are measured in terms that are more favorable for the Russian audience to hear, rather than those that provide an objective understanding of the situation.
By the end of the year, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially stated that they had captured as much as 6,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This figure is surely exaggerated, but even if we take it at face value, it's less than 1% of the country's territory. They spent 11 trillion rubles and several tens of thousands of Russian soldiers' lives for this.
And to make sure the goal continues to justify the means, all their insignificant advances are always seasoned with propaganda from the heroes of this special military operation. In short, nothing has changed since the days of the crucified boys in Donetsk. You
said that during the retreat, the Ukrainian armed forces shot civilians, but at that time, you told us directly that first and foremost, it was mainly young people who were shot.
Yes, young people, especially young people between the ages of 30 and 40. They were simply taken out and shot without trial, without investigation.
Everyone indiscriminately.
At the same time, analysts note that Putin has become quite knowledgeable about the geography of the Ukrainian Donbass. And this once again shows that the bunker dweller is being briefed on almost every meter of progress, as long as the reports say not a single day was spent standing still.
I think that Krasny Lyman will be taken in the very near future. 50% of the city is under our control, and the advance will continue further, already a bit south towards Sloviansk. I mentioned that this agglomeration includes the city of Kostiantynivka. Fighting is already taking place there. More than 50% of the city is under our control. I have no doubt that the guys will take this settlement as well.
On the scale of the two largest countries in Europe, we're talking about a tiny patch of territory. However, Putin is forcing us to study this area using kilometer-scale maps. There is also much for Ukrainian soldiers to remember. By holding back the daily onslaught of superior enemy forces, they are already performing an incredible feat. However, perhaps the main operation by the defense forces in 2025 did not take place at the front, but rather in the Russian rear. On Putin's birthday, on June 1st, as part of Operation Web, 5 Russian airfields with strategic aviation were simultaneously attacked by drones. According to Ukrainian intelligence, more than 40 aircraft were destroyed or damaged, including bombers such as the Tu-95, Tu-22 M3, Tu-160 and A-50 airborne command posts.
It is already clear that the losses on a single day, June 1st, exceeded all combat losses of strategic aviation in Russia's modern history. Taking into account the wars in Ukraine and Georgia, as well as in Chechnya, the Tu-95 and Tu-22 are no longer being produced, and even under the most optimistic estimates, new production of the Tu-160 does not exceed 2 units per year. In other words, it will take many years to recover the losses inflicted in just one day. There is also nowhere to buy new strategic bombers.
Speaking of the upcoming year 2026, taking into account the launch of production of Ukraine's long-range Flamingo missile and dozens of new drone modifications, a new web is clearly just around the corner. Meanwhile, Russia's capabilities are diminishing with each passing year, and this applies not only to technical capabilities but also to human resources.
Along with the replenishment of enemy troops, the existing models currently in use still rely on signing contracts for money. But this model is running its course since there is no longer enough money for these contracts and payments. They are not trying to recruit in the regions because the main burden of these payments was placed on regional budgets, which are now facing a very large budget deficit. These programs are either being shut down, suspended, or there are delays. So, under such conditions, it is of course very difficult to recruit people.
As a result, it should be noted that the very sanctions that were initially mocked in Russia by the end of 2025 have dealt a significant blow to the Russian budget. And now even the Kremlin can no longer ignore the obvious.
The Russian economy is in a rather difficult situation, and now systemic problems have begun there. And the price of Russian oil, with discounts, is currently about $35 to $34 per barrel. This is despite the fact that, on average, the production cost of Russian oil is around $40 to $45 per barrel. So in fact, if this price is maintained for a long enough period, at least half a year, Russia will simply run out of money. And
as many experts believe, when the money runs out, the war will end as well. Did you like this video? Then don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.